If you were fixing your bra straps, fussing with wires, or battling your bra during this podcast, stop right now. You'll want to hear this. Those bra problems, those problems you thought you had to live with, Third Love has solved them. Their bras make it easy to get what you want, whether it's ultimate cleavage, a smooth look, or stopping your shirt buttons from pulling. With over 60 sizes, including half cups you won't find anywhere else, you'll never be stuck between two sizes that don't fit. So stop settling for bad bras. Now's the time to treat yourself and get your problem solved. Save $15 on your first order with code podcast15 at thirdlove.com.
Hello, I'm Rabia Chaudhry. I invite you to join me every Tuesday for new episodes of Nighty Night Bedtime Stories to Keep You Awake, now on Podcast One. This new incarnation of Nighty Night is an anthology of stories that bring to life classic horror stories, some you're definitely familiar with, and others you'll be hearing for the first time. Join me as I tuck you into bed with stories that will leave you sleepless all night long. Get new episodes of Nighty Night every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 343 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
I am doing okay.
Yeah, you and I are putting this episode out, and then we're taking a week off.
Yeah.
Over the holidays, but we'll be back at the end of the year.
Yes, we will.
So this is our second to the last episode in 2023.
That is correct.
Yeah, but it will be really nice to have a week off. And so looking forward to that. So basically what I'm saying is no episode next week.
That's right. But make sure you come back.
Make sure you come back after that.
That's right.
Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Kathy.
Hey, Kathy.
Esme.
Hey, Esme.
Debbie Garcia.
What's going on, Garcia?
Elizabeth Hodge.
Hey, Hodge.
Mary.
What's going on, Mary?
Evelyn.
There's Evelyn.
Shannon jumped out at our highest level.
Well, thank you so much, Shannon.
Paige Bullock.
What's going on, Paige?
Kimberly Kaylee.
Hey, KK.
John S.
What's going on, John?
Phyllis McElroy.
Hey, Phyllis.
Mike McCombs.
Hey, thanks, McCombs.
Marina Sapola.
Ah, thank you so much, Marina.
Rebecca Bailey.
Hey, Rebecca.
Rachel Thompson.
There's Rachel.
And last but not least, Karen Mary.
Well, thank you so much, Karen.
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Aaron Barzak.
Hey, Barzak.
Yeah. So we appreciate the new Patreon support, the continued support. We also had a great PayPal donation from Obrinka Milosevic.
Oh, thanks, Milosevic.
So I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, I can't even say
I know you did not.
No, Milosevic.
None of that is close.
No, it is not.
Hey, we have an episode out right now on True Crime All the Time where we're talking about Bart Whitaker. And, this is a guy who went out with his family for a celebratory dinner. When they got home, they were shot by a masked gunman. His mom and brother died, but Bart and his dad survived.
Yeah.
But the suspicion soon turned to Bart.
It did.
And we go into the investigation and the police attempts to locate him. But it's a good episode. Make sure you check that out. All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I am ready.
We're talking about the unsolved death of David Bocks. David Bocks worked at the Fernald Feed Materials Production Center in Fernald, Ohio. I have never heard of Fernald, Ohio, and have no idea where it is, even though we live in this state.
Yeah, I think it's just like an hour away.
From where we are right now?
Yeah.
Huh. I did not know that. One day in June 1984, David disappeared in the middle of his shift. Hours later, a bone fragment was found in a furnace at the plant. 39 years later, no one knows how or why David ended up in the furnace, but some believe he was killed because he knew company secrets. Now, I say no one knows, how or why. It's very possible that someone knows if someone was responsible for his death.
Yeah.
But they haven't come forward, obviously, and explained it. David Anthony Bocks was born on November 4th, 1944 in Staten Island, New York. He was 39 years old when he died. David lived in Sims Township, Ohio. His neighbor said he was a quiet person and a good father. Dave was married, but he and his wife divorced in 1979. He had 3 children who visited him often. He was close with all of his kids and had a pretty good relationship with his ex-wife.
That's not always true for a lot of people.
No, it's not. I think I've told the story before, but, my parents got divorced, and I was pretty lucky that they were able to maintain a pretty good relationship throughout the years. It definitely made it easier on me. I know that for a fact. Divorce is tough enough, but then when you've got one parent pitting you against another and things like that, it can really be even tougher on a child. At the time of his death, it seemed like Dave was in a pretty good place in life, but he did have a history of mental illness. Some reports mention that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, but he managed his symptoms with medication and regular doctor's visits. Dave tried ending his life around the time of the divorce, but he didn't seem like he was struggling with depression or thoughts of ending his life at the time of his death. So I think that's an important distinction to make. Obviously, divorce can be a very traumatic event.
Oh, I think so.
In anyone's life. And, he may have been struggling a lot at that time, but by all accounts, he wasn't struggling that way at the time of his death. In March 1981, David was hired at the Fernald Feed Materials Production Center in Fernald, Ohio. Fernald Feed Materials Production Center, later known as National Lead of Ohio, or NLO, was a large production center in both Crosby Township and Ross Township. The former Fernald site is over 1,000 acres.
It's a big site.
Yeah, that's big. The plant provided thousands of jobs to both counties, but many didn't know much about the company. People didn't know much about what they produced. According to the website Historic Mysteries, a lot of people assumed Purina owned NLO because the two companies had similar logos.
That could confuse some people.
It can, but obviously these two companies couldn't have been any different than what they were. NLO was a uranium processing facility that produced uranium fuel cores for the United States nuclear weapons production complex from 1951 to 1989.
Well, that's some serious material.
It is. And, we actually had a place here in the small town where I live that did something similar along those lines. NLO employees were informed that the plant produced low levels of radiation, but nothing that could be considered harmful. They were also told not to speak about what they did at work. According to Historic Mysteries, one employee who started working for the company in 1982 said everyone had to sign an NDA. Now, Gibbs, what is an NDA?
Hey, that's a non-disclosure agreement.
All right.
I don't even know because you've had me sign several.
That's true. That was probably a very easy question for you.
Talking about company secrets.
Based on, our history. But no doubt there was a great level of secrecy right here. If you're being asked not to talk to anyone about what you're doing at work and, you have to sign an NDA, okay, there's some stuff going on that they don't want the outside world to know about. Harry Easterling, one of Dave's coworkers, told Unsolved Mysteries, when I was hired in there, they said that it was a low-level radiation plant and that you didn't have anything to worry about. There was nothing back there that would bother you, and just go on about your business, not to tell anybody what you were doing, and everything would be fine.
It's always a little scary hearing something like that when you're talking about uranium.
Scary to hear that it's a low level of radiation.
You have nothing to worry about. You'll be fine.
So You mean you would be skeptical
Yeah,
of what they're telling you.
absolutely. Especially back then when things probably weren't regulated the way they probably should have been.
Well, go back to something like Silkwood.
Yeah.
And is a company or, is a plant going to come out and say, what we're doing is causing you harm? No, probably not. They're going to say, everything's safe. Don't worry about it. We have everything under control. Dave worked as a pipe fitter in the maintenance department. According to Unsolved Mysteries, his main job was to inspect and maintain equipment in all of the plants at NLO. This included the safety pumps and dust collectors used in uranium processing. Harry Easterling recalled that Dave always told people to be careful. In areas with high radioactivity, he wanted to help keep others safe. Several sources reported that Dave was well liked at work and earned the trust and respect of his coworkers. It was said that he had no known enemies.
Sounds like he was a likable guy.
And I do think that's important, right? One place that you could easily develop some enemies, I don't know if enemy is the right word, but people who are not so fond of you, is at work. You're not sitting back drinking a cold one, watching a ball game. At work, tensions flare. Sometimes you can get into it with people. That can cause disagreements, which lead to, people not liking each other. So I do think it's important to point out that he was well liked. He had no known enemies at his workplace. June 18th, 1984 was a normal day for Dave. He worked nights at NLO. At 11 p.m. on the 18th, Dave met Harry Easterling at a restaurant parking lot so they could carpool to work. Harry drove that day. According to Harry, Dave was his usual self. He talked about going on vacation with his kids and a new lunchbox he'd recently bought.
Oh, the new lunchbox back in the day. Did you ever have a lunchbox? You're like, look how cool this is.
Why is it always back in the day? So people don't have lunchboxes today?
I just assume everybody calls DoorDash. Or
Well, you could be right about that.
I think you had a fancy lunch thing at one point. If I remember
I
right.
did. I did.
Yeah.
I actually had, it was kind of like a bento box.
Yeah.
You remember that?
I do.
A bunch of different compartments. It was fancy. And then it did not get used and it was put in a drawer.
Where it probably is even now. Today.
Still today.
Yeah.
Dave clocked into work around midnight on June 19th. Only the maintenance crew and personnel worked the night shifts at NLO. Production lines were shut down. Dave went to the maintenance room to get his assignment for the day. NLO had a total of 9 plants. Dave was assigned to work in plant 8. Harry recalled that Dave always put his lock and keys in the top section of his toolbox. He did this at the beginning of his shift on June 19th. Dave was seen a few times that evening by his coworkers. At 4 a.m., an employee saw Dave and his supervisor in a parked truck. It looked like they were having a serious discussion, and the windows were rolled up despite the fact that it was hot and humid that night.
Well, it seems a little strange. If he doesn't have the air running, the windows are up, maybe they're having a very private conversation.
That they don't want to risk anyone else overhearing with the windows down. But I think all these sightings and what is said to have occurred that night is important to discuss, right? As is the fact that, Harry said Dave seemed like there was nothing bothering him. He was his normal self. That's important. Now, the name of the supervisor has never been released to the public, and the topic of their conversation is unknown. But is it possible that this conversation had something to do with Dave's later disappearance?
Maybe.
We don't know. At 5 a.m., the same witness saw Dave walking to plant 4, not plant 8, where he had been assigned. This was the last time Dave was seen alive. Dave didn't show up to a scheduled safety meeting. At 7 a.m. in plant 4, Harry Easterling noticed his absence. After the meeting, Harry returned to the maintenance building around 7:30 a.m. and saw that Dave's toolbox was still open. He could see his keys in the toolbox. He thought Dave might have been working overtime. He made some calls throughout the plant, but couldn't locate Dave. Harry informed security that he was leaving and that Dave hadn't been around for a while. He asked the security guard to tell Dave if he showed up, that he would be waiting for him at the restaurant the following night. Harry told Unsolved Mysteries about Dave's keys. The supervisor closed his box, put the lock on his toolbox, and took his keys out of the lock. And from there on, I don't know what happened to the keys. Now, my first thought was that just his toolbox sitting there open was a little strange.
Yeah, unless he was working some overtime.
But wouldn't he have wanted to have his toolbox with him?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it worked there. It might have been one of those big toolboxes where you would take what you need to the different facility. And
oh, that's true. We don't know how big the toolbox. It could have been a rolling, like,
yeah, one of those
big toolbox.
But I'm just thinking, if me and you would carpool every day, like these guys did, I think you would find it strange at the end of the shift that I'm nowhere to be found, right?
And you didn't tell me that you were going to be late, or, hey, I'm going to work overtime, you go on home.
That's right.
Anything like that. So let's go back to the toolbox, though. Let's say it is one of those big, like, what do you call it, Snap-on, or
something like that.
One of the big rolling toolboxes.
Yeah.
You would think that he would have locked it.
Yeah, and if a shift, he would have locked it.
Or anytime he wasn't around it, because you would think you don't want people to take stuff out of your toolbox. So I don't know how he operated, but
how their process was.
To just walk away and leave it unlocked, I don't know. I kind of took it, even though Harry didn't say it, as though that was a little odd. Around the same time, 7:30 a.m., a furnace operator in Plant 6 reported that the oven casings were covered with a sticky residue, and he smelled something unusual. His supervisor said it was fine, and he could continue working.
Shocking. Let's not turn anything off. Keep this thing going.
We got to keep it going.
That's
I don't
right.
care what you smell.
We got numbers we got to meet here.
At 11 p.m. on June 19th, Harry arrived at the restaurant to meet Dave. His car was parked there, but he wasn't inside. It was Dave's turn to drive that night. Harry said that Dave sometimes went inside the restaurant to get food before work. He thought that might be the case. But when he touched the car, he felt that the fender and hood were cold.
Not a good sign.
No, because what does that most likely mean?
The car has been sitting there since the day before.
The night before, when they drove into work then. Harry reported Dave missing to company officials. Once he got to work, a security guard pried open Dave's locker, and they saw that David's street clothes from the previous shift were still inside. And I would think that had to have been concerning for everyone, because then it almost seems as though, he never left the plant.
Yeah.
Now, George Smith, director of personnel, told the Cincinnati Post that it wasn't abnormal for employees to forget to clock out. The company did their own search of the plant from 1 a.m. on June 20th until the sun rose. At that point, they contacted the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office Department to report Dave missing. So I think at this point, there's a real mystery here. Dave doesn't meet Harry to, drive back to his car. They open up his locker. His street clothes that he was wearing the night before are still in there. He didn't clock out. So what happened to him? The search team soon discovered records that showed that at 5:15 a.m. on June 19th, the furnace in Plant 6 dropped 28 degrees. The temperature was constantly maintained at 1,350 degrees Fahrenheit. The sudden temperature change suggested that a foreign object was dumped into the furnace. Okay, that's pretty hot.
It's extremely hot. It's also alarming at that point to realize that something made the temperature dip by 28 degrees.
Well, then an employee found what they thought was a piece of bone on the lip of the furnace. The furnace was shut down immediately at that point, but it would take a full 3 days for it to cool down enough to be properly searched.
Well, that's amazing right there.
Well, when you're at 1,300 plus degrees Fahrenheit, it's going to take a little while. I mean, my Yeti keeps my coffee hot for hours at a time.
Oh, yeah, I get that. It's like those cast iron pans you cook with too. I mean, they stay hot. As soon as you can turn the heat off, and they're hot for another hour afterwards. Reminds me of just some big cast iron / Yeti furnace.
True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to Gibby and I talk, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now, getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy, and you could save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $750 on average. And auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles in your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So just like your favorite podcasts, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations. Hey TCAT fans, I want to tell you about Masterclass. You may have heard me talk before about taking a cooking class with Gordon Ramsay. It was an amazing experience, and I put what I learned to good use. Well, Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and for anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Whether you're watching Masterclass on TV, listening in audio mode in the app, or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It really is like Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. My wife was so impressed with my cooking that she has asked me politely to go back and take more classes with Gordon Ramsay. There are over 180 classes to pick from, with new classes added every month. This holiday season, give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/unsolved. Right now, you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/unsolved. Masterclass.com/unsolved. Offer terms apply. Angie's List is now Angie, the home to skilled neighborhood professionals. Angie is your home for everything home, and they've made it easier than ever to connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. If you own a home, you know how much work it can take, whether it's everyday maintenance and repairs or making dream projects a reality. It can be hard just to know where to start, but now all you need to do is Angie that and find a skilled local pro who will deliver the quality and expertise you need. Angie has over 20 years of home service experience, and they've combined it with new tools to simplify the whole process. Bring them your project online or with the Angie app. Answer a few questions, and Angie can handle the rest from start to finish, or help you compare quotes from multiple pros and connect instantly. And all of that means you can take care of just about any home project in just a few taps, because when it comes to getting the most out of your home, you can do this when you Angie that. Download the free Angie mobile app today or visit Angie.com. That's ANGI.com. George Smith told the press that Dave was assigned to work at least 2 football fields away from the furnace, according to the Cincinnati Post. So we're talking about what, at least 200 yards. I guess what he's saying was there was really no reason for him to be around that furnace at all.
Yeah, but I also remember the witness saying that he saw Dave headed towards building 4 when he was supposed to be in 8, and now the furnace is in 6. So I don't know what's going on here.
Smith said that is in a portion of the plant where nobody was working. And even if he were, there are just no possibilities of him falling into it. Smith explained that the furnace was used to heat uranium ingots and rearrange the grain structure of metal. There were no catwalks or scaffolding around the furnace that Dave could have fallen from. So, I mean, I think, he's saying a couple of different things here. Number one, nobody was supposed to be working in there.
Right.
And then number two, it's not something that you're just going to accidentally fall into. So where is that leading us?
So it means somebody would have to find a way to help you fall into it.
Yeah, I think it's leading us down the path of possible foul play, right? There's nobody working in that area. Well, then maybe can you do something without being seen? That's one possibility. The furnace had 2 to 3 foot openings at each end and was covered by a suspended hood with an 18-inch gap between the lower edge and walls of the furnace. Based on this description, it doesn't seem like it would be very easy for someone to fall into it or crawl into it willingly, especially considering how hot it was during normal operations.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, does it? I mean, you're not going to try to climb into that knowing that you're going to be scalded at every inch.
No, at 1,350 degrees Fahrenheit, I think it would be very difficult to just open up this 2 to 3 foot, hatch or something at one end and crawl into this furnace. It just doesn't seem plausible at all. Now, could somebody put you into the furnace after you were, incapacitated or already dead? That's a different story.
Yeah, possible.
When Dave's family was informed that he was missing, his ex-wife tried to contact the company to get more information, but they essentially said they couldn't tell her anything because they didn't know anything. The oven was finally searched on June 23rd, 1984. Employees dug through the furnace waste to look for evidence. They discovered a set of Dave's keys, the steel toe of a boot, part of what looked like metal safety glasses, fragments of a plastic walkie-talkie, wire, and bone fragments.
Okay, we got some suspicious items there.
Yeah, it's not looking good for Dave because some of this stuff, namely the keys, were directly tied to him. And it was said that the keys went to Dave's car, 3 padlocks, and one was thought to be his house key, but it was damaged by the furnace, so this couldn't be proven. At the time, it was reported that the wire was similar to the wire commonly used at the plant and may have been thrown into the furnace before Dave disappeared. Unsolved Mysteries noted that the wire was looped together into 3 oddly connecting circles. Okay, I don't know what that means, but it could mean something.
It could be.
Chief Deputy Victor Corelli declined to comment when asked if it was possible that the wire was used to bind Dave. Hamilton County Sheriff Lincoln Stokes said there was no indication whatsoever of foul play, and their findings would be sent to Washington.
I think it'd be kind of difficult to determine foul play in some of the evidence or some of the things found. I don't want to say evidence because I don't know if it's evidence, but some of the things that they found.
Yeah, I mean, you have some things connecting to Dave, right? Ultimately, it could be that the bone fragment belonged to Dave. But, let's remember, this is 1984. This is pre-DNA.
Oh, yeah.
Or pre-DNA used in, solving cases conviction-wise. Chief Deputy Victor Corelli said after the search, is quoted by the Cincinnati Post, "It appears that the victim was in that tank, but there is no conclusive proof. There doesn't appear to be any reason for this thing. There's no motive for anyone to kill him. The whole thing is strange."
I think we agree.
I think we do absolutely agree. So what he's saying is that, they think he was in the tank, but they can't prove that it was foul play because what's pointing to it? Other than the fact that it would be very difficult probably for him to get in there himself in that very, very hot oven.
Right.
But that in and of itself doesn't prove foul play. Corelli told reporters there were 4 possibilities for what happened to Dave. The first was that Dave was murdered or knocked unconscious and put into the furnace to destroy evidence. Corelli said about this theory, it would be extremely difficult to put anyone in there against their will. They would have to be unconscious or already dead. And that was one of my thoughts, right from the the beginning.
But it would be a good way to destroy evidence.
Well, absolutely.
Marty.
You talking about Marty from Ozarks?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they did buy a funeral home and they did cremate people as a way to get rid of evidence. And we talked a lot about people trying to, burn bodies after murder. And that's not the easiest thing to do. But if you have a furnace that is at almost 1400 Fahrenheit, then I think you've got something that's going to accomplish some of what you're wanting to do.
Yeah. That's one hot son of a bitch.
Well, and let's break it down. What are we really talking about here? Getting rid of clothing, getting rid of most of the bones.
Yeah.
So does it then become impossible to tell how somebody was killed? Yeah. If you just got bone fragments, you don't have much to go on.
And I'm thinking it probably complicates it even more with whatever else is potentially in that furnace.
Now, Corelli said that the second possibility was that Dave died of suicide by lowering himself into the furnace. However, investigators found no evidence that Dave was considering ending his life. People close to Dave said he didn't show signs of depression or suicidal ideation.
I just think there's probably I don't want to say it, but the only way I know how to say it, an easier way. Seems like a very torturous way to slowly lower yourself
into this, or to even jump in or dive in, or, however he would have gotten in, it was going to be brutal.
And I think there would be screams.
But again, there was nobody working in there.
That's true.
So was there anybody to hear him scream if that would have been the case? Although my thought is at that heat, most things are going to shut down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The third possibility was that Dave accidentally fell into the furnace, which was considered the least likely possibility because of the way the furnace was built. And we talked about it, right? There wasn't like catwalks. You weren't walking over top of this furnace. You weren't just going to fall over a railing.
Which, if it was going to be difficult for him to accidentally fall into it, then I think it's kind of has to go back to the
idea that it would be hard to purposefully do it. Yeah. I think so. I think you're absolutely right. The fourth possibility was that Dave faked his own death by putting his keys, glasses, boots, walkie-talkie, and bone fragments inside. The police found no unusual transactions in Dave's bank account that would indicate he was planning to run away, and he had not spoken to anyone else about this.
But it's still a possibility.
It is. My one question is, where are you getting the bone fragments? So maybe they're not yours. They're somebody else's bone. They're not going to be your bone fragments if you're running away.
Did you dig them up somewhere?
Yeah. So Corelli, kind of lays out these four different possibilities. My thought is that the last two are probably the most unlikely. I can't see someone accidentally falling into this furnace the way that it was said to have been constructed. And I'm always pretty dubious about people faking their own deaths in these unsolved cases because we're many years down the road. Does it mean that it couldn't happen? No, but I just think it's more unlikely than it is likely in my eyes.
Well, it's not like he had a reason to fake that we were aware of.
Yeah.
I mean, unless he really owed some money to some loan shark gambling thing, or, maybe he knew something going on that he feared for his life working there, that he had to get away. But you would think somebody would have known that. Somebody that he was close to.
It would have come out. You would think. He would have confided maybe in his wife or
his ex-wife
or his kids or somebody, his good friends.
Yeah.
Chief Deputy Corelli said, "We have not ruled out any possibilities, but on the other side of the ledger, there were no indications of foul play or no indications he would want to end his life. There's basically no indications of anything.
No.
Is the problem.
Yeah, the only indication we have is he went to work that night. That was it.
And nobody has seen him since.
Yeah.
And some of his things were found burned inside this furnace. Dave's brother Peter told the Cincinnati Post he believed Dave was killed, saying he's not the type of person to kill himself or just disappear. In my own heart, I can say in all honesty, he didn't go in there on his own. And again, I'm in the camp where I don't think that's the most likely scenario either.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Peter noted that Dave was in good health, spent $100 on groceries the day before he went missing, and had just recently remodeled his home. And this is something that comes up, right? When people go missing, they've just stocked their fridge.
Right.
Well, the question kind of is, well, why would they do that if they were planning on, let's say ending their life or disappearing? Why would you remodel your home? Now, the counter argument that people make is maybe it was spur of the moment.
Yeah.
And so all of these things had already occurred, the ordering of the groceries, the remodeling of the home, and then something, went south. According to NLO Personnel Director George Smith, some employees speculated Dave was murdered, but employees were not afraid to work at the plant. And Gibbs, what does that tell you?
That people didn't think there was any concern
to them. So that means to me that if he was murdered, it was for a very specific reason related to him. Not like there was a serial killer running around the plant. In August 1984, it was confirmed that the bone fragments found inside the furnace were human, but the Hamilton County Coroner's Office was still trying to determine if the bones were the remains of David Bocks. And again, I think in 1984, that would have been a little bit of a tougher task than that is today.
Didn't have the technology back then.
In September, Dave's family pushed to have him declared legally dead so they could collect his estate.
Well, he did have kids, so I'm sure that they needed to make sure that the kids were taken care of.
Yeah. And they probably needed the money and all that came with it. Chief Deputy Victor Corelli said the sheriff's department was no longer actively investigating the case, but it was technically still open. The coroner's office never issued a death certificate because of the lack of remains. And we hear that quite a bit. We're not actively investigating it, but the case is still technically open.
Yeah, because we can't really close it.
It's just a cold case that nobody's really working on. Ohio law requires 5 years to pass before someone can be declared legally dead. David's 3 children and his ex-wife, Caroline, filed suit to have the 5 years waived because Dave was already presumed dead. Family attorney Leo Breslin told the Cincinnati Enquirer, "We've got people who can suffer greatly if they have to wait 5 years for benefits that under any other circumstance would come to them now. All we want is for the children to be able to collect the same benefits they would be getting if their father had been killed in a car accident." And like you said, I get this. It's not being callous. It's the fact that there's a need for, the money or whatever belonged to his estate to help feed and clothe his children.
Because I'm assuming up to that point, the wife was probably getting support payments and child support from him.
And now she's not. NLO was back in the news a few months later due to an emissions scandal. On December 10th, 1984, it was announced that the Department of Energy had joined an investigation to determine whether large amounts of uranium dust escaped from the Fernald plant over a 3-month period. It was possible that up to 350 pounds of uranium escaped.
That's a lot.
Is it? I don't know much about uranium, so I really don't know how much 350 pounds is, but seems like a lot.
Yeah.
Seems like any escaping.
Uranium?
Yeah, any uranium dust escaping. And I'm sure there is some maybe acceptable amount, but it can't be 350 pounds. Company spokesman George Smith said that even if uranium did escape through the exhaust system, there was no danger to the public or workers. It was believed that the uranium escaped through a flawed filter and pressure monitor in a work area exhaust system. Monitoring data was contradictory, which is why the company wasn't sure whether the leak occurred. According to the Cincinnati Enquirer, one sensor indicated uranium dust was escaping from the exhaust system, but nothing was found outside the building or on the clean side of the internal filter system.
Always makes me nervous when they're like, yeah, there's nothing to worry about. I know this is like radioactive material, but, and I'm thinking when we're talking about this, I just went to the dentist not too long ago, and every time you go there, when they take an x-ray, they throw this 50-pound lead vest on you.
Sure.
For just an x-ray.
So you're not taking any chances.
Yeah. But yet, you're pushing radioactive dust in the air. I don't know.
Well, and what happens if somebody breathes that in? But haven't we seen time and time again that, these companies will do anything they can to protect their image? And, because there's huge repercussions.
Oh, yeah.
If some of these things turn out to be correct. So it's almost just like part of the playbook that they come out in the beginning and say, no, we don't think that's what happened. Everything's fine. And, prove us wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. Cover up time.
NLO Assistant Superintendent Weldon Adams said lower level officials waited too long to tell senior management about the contradictory monitoring systems. He assured the public that their uranium was only slightly enriched and did not emit harmful gamma radiation. Adams did acknowledge higher cancer rates among NLO employees, but their records did not indicate an epidemic of certain cancers. None of that is giving me the warm and fuzzies.
No, just the fact that you said higher cancer rates among their employees is to me, I think that's bad enough.
And what does only slightly enriched mean? And, let's break down harmful gamma radiation.
Yeah.
That's what turned the Hulk into the Hulk.
That's what I was just thinking. Hulkster.
Robert Quillen, the director of the Ohio Department of Health Radiation Health Program, said they would follow up with the federal investigators to make sure they were telling the truth. Well, I would hope so. We can't just be taking these people's word that there's not harmful uranium dust floating around being emitted.
I think it's awesome that you have state agencies and federal agencies making sure they're telling the truth.
Who's in charge of watching who here?
Exactly.
On December 12, 1984, the Department of Energy found that because NLO waited 3 weeks to report the leak, they didn't follow Department of Energy regulations. The DOE was sure at this point that the uranium dust escaped from the facility, but virtually all of it was believed to have remained on the company's property, and there was low risk to nearby residents. It was believed that 270 pounds of dust escaped from mid-September to December 7th. Again, I don't know how to put that amount into perspective because I don't know a lot about uranium dust, but it does seem like that's a lot.
It seems like it, especially if you live nearby.
And how do they know that virtually all of it remained on the company's property?
I think they're speculating.
I don't know how they determine that. But I think if you live nearby and you're hearing that there's low risk to nearby residents, you know what I'd love to hear? There's no risk, because any risk, now you've got me worried.
Yeah.
Later that month, it was announced that the National Institute of Occupational and Safety and Health would do an independent evaluation of employee health records at NLO. On December 20th, papers reported that the House Energy and Commerce Committee was investigating the leak to determine if the public was being adequately protected. Okay, that seems like something that should happen.
Normally things like this don't turn out well.
No, normally they don't. Then on December 21st, it was reported that the state of Ohio was going to sue NLO for failure to follow state and federal hazardous waste laws. The state alleged that employees of NLO allowed hazardous waste containers to leak, allowed creek water to flow over hazardous waste burial sites, and failed to report waste leaks. They were also operating without their required permits. They claimed NLO was guilty of 22 violations. So not only are we talking about uranium dust escaping into the air. Well, now we're talking about hazardous waste being buried, containers leaking, and creek water flowing over that. You think how dangerous that is, because that creek water is going to continue to flow, and where's it going to go? How much can be contaminated?
And maybe Dave was aware of some of this, and maybe he brought it to others' attention.
Yeah, and obviously that is something that we're going to talk about, because that is one thing that's been alleged, right? That Dave found out about this. He knew about this. Maybe he threatened to, blow the whistle on it, and it got him killed. A spokesperson explained that their permit expired in June, and they had been negotiating site improvements. It was emphasized that this suit was not connected with the uranium leak from earlier that month. The company's union also alleged that half a dozen workers contracted illnesses believed to be linked to radiation and toxic substances. Okay, this is starting to sound like a pretty dangerous place to work.
Yeah.
NLO was facing a potential federal probe after the union alleged that workers who had health and safety complaints were harassed. Union officials claimed that hundreds of employees were intimidated into silence and asked for guarantees of immunity for workers who give evidence about health and safety conditions at the facility. Now, again, this is 1984?
Yeah.
I don't know when some of the whistleblower laws came into effect. This might have, predated some of them.
But I'm sure several individuals felt threatened, worried about bringing things forward.
Oh, I absolutely. If you're being intimidated, if you're being harassed, and I think as it relates to David Bocks, so you can make the argument that he found out about something. You could also make the argument that he was just one among many who were either experiencing symptoms or had figured out that some of these things were going on, and maybe he was killed to serve two purposes. Number one, to shut him up so that he couldn't, blow the whistle. But number two, is an example to all these other people. We're harassing you, we're intimidating you. Well, what better intimidation is there than to think that this other person who spoke up was killed?
Yeah.
So what's going to happen to me if I continue down the path I'm on?
You're going to change your mind.
Possibly.
Yeah.
In response, NLO asked the Department of Energy to investigate them. On December 22nd, Assistant Superintendent Weldon Adams announced the company would be getting out of the uranium processing business at the end of their contract with the DOE. The contract expired at the end of September 1985, but the plant would operate until April 1986 under a contract extension. Ultimately, an investigation found that NLO released over 200 tons of radioactive dust particles into the air and local water sources.
Well, that's a lot more pounds.
Well, we were talking hundreds of pounds, and now we're talking hundreds of tons. According to Historic Mysteries, between 1951 and 1989, NLO produced 170,000 metric tons uranium of metal products and 35,000 metric tons uranium of secondary compounds, such as uranium tetrafluoride, which is also called green salt, and uranium trioxide. According to investigative reporter DC Cole, Plant 8, where Dave Bocks was supposed to be working on the night of his disappearance, released 4 times more radioactive contaminants into the environment than any other plant site. It sounds like, the plants were emitting all kinds of stuff, but Plant 8 was by far the worst offender.
And maybe Dave knew that.
And I think a lot of people believe that's possible. The scandal of 1984 led to a lot of speculation that Dave Bocks might have known something about the uranium emissions and that some people wanted to stop him from talking. Dave's family and coworkers have suggested that he was killed and put in the furnace to destroy evidence. Some think that when Dave was seen talking to his supervisor, he was telling this person what he knew about the uranium. There is a theory that Dave found out about the uranium dust contamination and was killed to prevent him from talking. And I understand completely why, people would gravitate towards this theory. What else do we have in this case, Gibbs, but theories? There's not a lot of hard evidence in the way of, how did he get in the furnace? Was it really him in the furnace? We don't have a lot of that.
No, we don't have like a smoking gun.
No. What we have are these little things, him talking to his supervisor. Well, what were they talking about? It just so happens that, they're sitting inside a truck. Could it be that he's saying, hey, I know what's going on. It's wrong. You got to do something about it. And then from there, something bad happened to him.
Somebody makes a call and they say, don't let him leave tonight.
Another aspect of the case that people have found unusual is what happened to Dave's keys. As mentioned earlier, his coworker, Harry Easterling, saw the keys on his toolbox, but they were found in the furnace. The keys were still intact, and only one of them was slightly damaged by the furnace, which we said normally ran over, 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. You would think that these keys would have melted if Dave had them on his person when he was put in the furnace or he entered the furnace. So this has led to theories that the keys were thrown into the furnace shortly before it was searched. That the same could be said for the plastic pieces of walkie-talkie and metal glasses that were found. And I kind of thought some of that was strange. And when you think about plastic pieces of a walkie-talkie, how in the world are they going to survive a 1,350 degree Fahrenheit furnace?
Yeah, you think they would have liquefied or, at least melted down
Melted to nothing.
Something unrecognizable.
But remember, they shut the furnace down.
Yeah.
And allowed it to cool for a number of days. So in this theory, the keys, the walkie-talkie, the glasses, all of that is thrown in, much later.
Yeah.
After the furnace has already cooled. So maybe that's why those things weren't destroyed the same way they would have been if they were in there when the furnace was running full blast.
Right, exactly.
However, there is no conclusive evidence that Dave was a potential whistleblower or that anyone was out to get him. If Dave was going to come forward about toxins at the plant, he wouldn't have been the first one to do so. In 1982, the widow of truck driver Raymond Edwards sued NLO for $1.75 million after her husband died from lung cancer. Her suit alleged that her husband died in March 1981 as a result of radiation and harmful chemicals. She claimed the company knew about the dangerous health conditions and didn't warn workers.
I mean, the company put profit in front of worker safety?
That would be shocking,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, especially then.
In February 1984, months before Dave died, a widow named Nancy Abbott sued NLO for over $2.5 million and alleged that the company intentionally contributed to her husband's death by allowing him to be exposed to radiation at the plant. Augustus Edwin Abbott started working at Fernald in 1950. He became sick in 1981 and died of cancer in January 1982. He was only 50 years old. His wife said he worked as a technician and used various instruments. NLO officially shut down in 1989. Afterwards, 2 programs were created for medical surveillance and offered exams and diagnostic testing to 12,480 enrolled members.
That's a lot of members.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
It really is. In 1990, Congress approved the Fernald Closure Project, a program run by the Department of Energy to clean up the site. Fluor Fernald, part of the Fluor Corporation, finished cleaning the site in 2006. Today, the area is a nature preserve. Low-level radioactive waste is stored on site under a 65-foot mount. The most hazardous materials were shipped out west to nuclear storage sites. And, these are kind of scary stories.
They really are.
When you think about the fact that these types of places kind of operate or operated in all different cities around the country.
Yeah.
Like I said, we have one right down the street.
Yeah.
That's now closed, but they did all kinds of strange uranium enriching, and who knows? It was all secretive and stuff like that. But
there's a big mount there too.
There is. They literally call it the mound.
Yeah.
I don't even know what's underneath there.
It just glows every night.
But you think about all the different ways that we kind of help to screw up our environment. Well, here's another one.
Oh, yeah.
Hazardous waste in our creeks and rivers. That's not good for anyone.
No. You got 3-headed frogs and all kind of weird things, right?
Yeah, it's a wonder half of us are still alive, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm glad that they've stepped in and, shut these places down, put cleanup projects in place, but you just can't probably even measure the damage that was done over the number of years that these places ran. You really can't. And how many lives were affected? But I think, as it relates to David Bocks, this is a very strange case. I think because of the elements that he appears to have disappeared, while he was at work, the company's doing all of these things that are illegal, dangerous, emitting harmful chemicals. And it's quite possible that he was silenced.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way for us to conclusively know that. Heck, I don't think to this day they can prove that it was him in there. I don't know if they ever have. I never saw anything in the research about it. I saw where they were attempting to do it.
Right.
Now, if they still had those bone fragments with today's technology, they should easily be able to do it. But let's just assume it was him inside the furnace. Then you go back to the 3 or 4 theories that were kind of, put up and try to figure out what makes the most sense.
Yeah. How'd he get in there?
How'd he get in there? Does it make sense that, he crawled into this 1400 degree furnace himself? And to me, I would say, no, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It sounded like it was nearly impossible for him to accidentally fall into this furnace. So then what are you really left with? Someone intent on doing him harm, killed him, or at the very least knocked him out, and then put his body inside the furnace. And why would they do that when it was said time and time again that, this is a guy who was well liked, he had no known enemies? Well, would you develop some enemies if you start expressing your concern about things that the company is doing?
Yeah.
I would say, yeah. Now, you wouldn't think that a company would go to the extreme. And when I say the company, I mean some person who worked there. I don't know that it would have come from the highest level, but who knows?
You don't. I mean, I remember when I was an attorney at a young age, and I worked at that Memphis law firm, and I brought some things forward, and
they were after you.
They were. I had to jump out this window. I had to go through this aquarium to hide from them. And
at one point, you were down in the Caymans, I think. Yeah.
I had to copy a lot of these files and put them on a little boat, just to make sure they were always going to be floating out there at sea, just in case.
I do remember that. That was a strange time.
Yeah.
I think you were going by Mitch back then.
I was.
If I remember correctly. Yeah. But, the death of David Bocks remains a mystery 39 years later. And like I said, it will most likely continue to be a mystery. I don't know how they're going to conclusively solve or be able to say exactly what happened to him. There's been a ton of speculation. There just really is no proof that foul play was involved in his death, but it also can't be ruled out because his remains were essentially destroyed.
I think right at this point, everything's on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons why I think this is a case that's, highly analyzed, highly talked about in forums, and people have their own theories, and they talk about which one is more likely, not likely. But if I had to put money on it, which I don't, I'm not a huge bettor, I don't think that David Bocks just up and vanished to start a new life.
I don't think so either.
I don't think that at all. I don't think he had an accident where he accidentally, and I'm using my air quotes here, fell into this furnace. And I find it very hard to believe that he made the decision to end his life and he felt as though the best way to do it was to climb into this furnace.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
So what does that really leave you with?
Foul play.
It really does. Yeah. But
what type of foul play?
What type, and at the hands of who? You have this thing about the keys, the walkie-talkie, all of that. Does it make sense that they were thrown in, some days later after the furnace had cooled some? And it kind of does. That furnace was so hot that I feel like it would have completely obliterated some plastic walkie-talkie.
Yeah.
There is no way that thing was going to survive in any pieces.
It still be recognized as a walkie-talkie.
No.
Yeah.
It would just be maybe some black sludge or, something that would harden. I don't know, man. It's a fascinating case.
It is. It really is.
And the fact that, it occurred about less than an hour south of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty close.
But that's it for our episode on the death of David Bocks. All we can really say is that it's an unsolved death.
Yeah.
Can't call it a murder.
Can't.
It's really hard to even call it a disappearance because it's hard not to think that, he was in that furnace. But we've got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Yeah, let's hear them.
I was just listening to an episode. I can't remember which one, but I've been listening to for a couple of years now. And I think one of the reasons I love y'all so much is because y'all's voices. Y'all have the best voices. Like, there are some podcasts that probably give about the same information, not as well as y'all do, but they just have annoying voices, so I can't listen to them. But you, Mike, have the best podcast voice. I guess that's what you would call it. And then Gibby, he's got the best sidekick voice. I don't know. I just was thinking about that as I was listening today, because I just love y'all's voices. So I thought I'd let you know. Keep your own time ticking.
The funny thing about that is that Mike makes me go through voice training, and he also likes it if my voice sounds like I'm not well. If I have a cold or something. So
no, the audience likes that because they call that the sexy Gibby voice.
Mike makes me go to this clinic down the street and lick the doorknobs at least once every other week to make sure I maintain that. Yeah.
I just thought it was funny because I remember you showing me your high school yearbook and you were voted best sidekick voice.
That's strange, isn't it?
It is. I mean, and that she's able to point it out.
Yeah, who would have thought?
No.
Hi, my name is Heather. I live in Vermont, and first off, I cannot believe I'm leaving this voicemail. I always promised myself I wouldn't do it, but then after a year of listening to you guys pretty much every day, all day long, I just had to call and say thank you. I really appreciate you. I went through a really, really rough month, and you were pretty much the only consistency. That being said, though, my husband completely blames you for my anxiety. So that's also kind of funny. Anyway, I am actually Team Fergie. Sorry, Gibby. I don't know. Fergie's a lot more like me. Have a great day. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Man, I was excited too. She said Vermont. I'm thinking White Christmas. That's where, the big.
It's your favorite movie.
Yeah, but no, she's Team Fergie. So,
Well, it's a rare Team Fergie sighting, but, we have to have some every now and then. I know it bums you out. Sometimes you don't sleep at night.
I won't.
Just
tonight.
because one person in the world is Team Fergie.
Yeah, tonight I will not sleep.
But we appreciate the voicemails very much. So, again, we're off next week, but we definitely hope everybody has a great holiday. Spend time with family, enjoy the traditions, all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I will be here, keeping an eye on the house for you.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that.
So, just don't pay attention to any calls, alarms. I got you covered.
I got this whole place wired with video.
Yeah. So shield your eyes.
It's all recorded.
I don't know if you want to see some of the things that might be on that.
It's all recorded to the cloud.
Yeah.
You can't even delete it.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Hold on to your jingle bells. Pluto TV has all your holiday favorites for free. Enjoy Christmas classics like Scrooge with Bill Murray or Last Holiday with Queen Latifah. Plus, dive into festive channels like holiday movie favorites by Lifetime or Hallmark movies and more. Download the Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming holiday favorites on live channels and on demand. With thousands of free movies and TV shows, Pluto TV is your home for the holidays. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.